Hey, sweet souls, it's DTO in the flow. Thank you for tuning in. Where are you at? Tell us where you're located. We love it. This is a global community, a global network here, and what we are creating are possibilities for all of us to understand who we are as creative souls in this journey, and for us to collaborate and to share in comments below any kind of question. So, my first question below is, where are you located? ¿Dónde están? ¿Dónde estás? I currently am in Costa Rica, really enjoying the life here. And I'm originally from Iowa, and I've been missing traveling. And so about 3 months ago, I came down to Costa Rica. So let us know where you're at, what continent, what place, what space. And then, as I said, we are live streaming. So we are on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you have any questions for our next guest today, go ahead and comment, ask a question, and share. And today we get to speak with Kapha. And as you can understand by the cool, amazing photos of Kapha, this is a man on a mission. And he creates seamless blends of modern electronic dance with organic instruments over lush soundscapes. The result of his music is a complete somasensory experience that stirs the body with mystical dance vibes while awakening the spirit to extra dimensional levels of sensations and perception. And without further ado, we are going to bring on Kapha.
What's up, guys?
Great to see you. Thanks
Yeah,
for being here.
good to be here, man.
Well, I'm always grateful to be able to speak with a fellow music producer. I feel that we're all from the same planet and we have this very artistic part of our sensories, whatever that is. Of course, people say music comes from your soul, comes from the heart. Also, your style of production, your techniques. But let's kick it off with question number one, which is your backstory, how it all began. And that's going to be asking you, when did your personal journey with music start? And then what happened? Was there an aha moment? Was the first song you heard? And then why is it important? Like, how did you get the vibes of music in your cells? So how did it all start?
So it started really about 15 years ago when I was, seventh, eighth grade. My sister got a guitar, and I heard it from the other room, and I was like, "What is that?" Being brought up on, the Eagles, Led Zeppelin, all those, classical rock bands. I just had to get my hands on it. So that's how it all started. Played guitar for about, I don't know, 10, maybe 8 or 10 years. And during that time, my music taste really changed. I was growing up, I was going through college, found a lot of electronic music, especially in college. Got really into jazz music as well. So it was kind of this blend after I left school of, now I have all this information at my fingertips and I know how to play this instrument. So why don't I just start making my own music? So it kind of was the spark. College was where the creative juices really got flowing for me, in terms of expression and artistic, kind of traveling around in my own headspace. So it kind of gave me a concrete place to start from once I got out.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I love the fact that it was a family experience and very much for me as well. There was someone in my family playing music and instruments, and then like, oh, what's that? That sounds amazing. And was
I
that
know, right?
acoustic or electric guitar? How did it start off?
It was actually electric guitar.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So my sister got one, and like I said, I'd heard it all growing up my life. But from there, it went from acoustic guitar to electric guitar to bass. Obviously, that was like the easy transition, and then
Yeah.
especially when you start producing music, I have to learn the keyboard now, because that's kind of where everything goes. So and through that experience of pushing myself, I'm all self-taught. I never took I took some music classes in high school. Really was just playing guitar the whole time and skipping class, just to go play with music kids, do something
Yeah.
fun for the day. But it really, once I got out of college, it had a profound effect on who I was as a person, because the music really impacts you, especially growing up. Changing styles and things like that. It kind of goes with your emotions as you age. You go through those turmoil, and you're 18, 19, you just want to listen to hard rock and stuff and get all this, emotion out. And then once you get to your 20s, it's a little bit more, smooth, jazzy and stuff like that. And it's really just developed into like dance and kind of electronic, but with a lot of live instruments. I never really wanted to lose that flavor in my music.
That's wonderful. Yeah. So then started right away on the electric guitar, and you just recognize the. Now, did you start playing like music that you heard that was your favorite music at the time? Like, how did it start? Did you start like right away, like improvising, or?
Yeah, I played actually by ear for a really long time. I had friends who were in like jazz band, so we'd always go to their place, and they were kind of the party house where their parents would, set them all up in the basement, all soundproof, so we just blasted to 2 in the morning. So
Right on.
I played a lot of like rhythm guitar. 'Cause my friend was really into music theory, so he had a lot of the scales and progressions and all that kind of down. So I always played by ear, and listening to someone like Jimi Hendrix who played by ear for a good portion of his career, if not all of his career, that was kind of my mindset for a while. But like I said, once I got to producing, I was like, oh man, I got to learn some theory. I got to actually, take this to the next level. And from there, you really start to grow as a musician. You start to learn how everything kind of connects, and you hear it the whole time, but then you can see the patterns, and you're like, oh, okay, that makes much more sense.
Yeah, I love that. And I was brought up classically trained, and I took music theory. And then there's also like, I get the fundamentals. I understand from the right brain to the left brain, right? So the left brain is more of like the theory and the mechanics and fundamentals. And then we get to like free flow in the right brain, which is more the creative. And a lot of musicians, it doesn't really matter how you get there, I think, as far as the gift and the power and the transformative like powers of what music can create for our lives. And it's like, hey, so everyone has a great backstory, and I love the fact that. And does your sister still play to this day, or did you
Yeah,
take
she's
it over?
actually, yeah, she actually does acting. So she kind of went the other way with performance. She went more like the visual, I guess. That's the way I always kind of put it. But she still plays ukulele. She still plays guitar in her spare time. So
Very nice. Yeah, so
yeah,
she's a creative family member like yourself, and that's great.
yeah.
Wonderful. Well, let's jump into question two here. So now that you got, as you said, you went through different genres of music, and you experienced and you heard and listened. And then, of course, you start playing the guitar. So, number two, which there are plenty of music producers out there watching and listening right now. So, what was it for you that opened up the world of music production?
It was actually that same friend who was, the music theory basement party guy. I was over at his house, and he was doing a lot of electronic production. And he had this launch pad set up, and he's like, "Hey man, I got all these clips. Come over here. We'll, try it out and see what happens." And it was kind of like second nature. I started launching clips, and I started, putting the scenes together, and, drum patterns with different rhythm sections and synths. And from there, I was like, oh man, I got to learn this stuff. This is awesome. And that was about probably about like 5 years ago now. So it took a couple of years to really like understand what was going on. I'd taken physics in school, so I knew how frequency spectrums worked and things like that. So I had like a basic understanding of EQ, but I really kind of got serious probably about 2018. So about 3 or 4 years. I think that was what my first major release was, only about 3 years ago. So probably about 4 years I've been actually producing kind of, I wouldn't say full time, but as much as I can, and really like dedicating a good chunk of my day to day to music production.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, and I love what you said about, having the same friend inspire you, because then once you create that connection and that credibility with someone, that it's like, oh, whoa, we're on the same page here. We really enjoy this kind of music, whether we're playing it. And then it's like, whoa, you know how to produce. And I feel like a lot of musicians make that jump, and it completely, and I know in our similar story, has allowed us to have, literally millions and millions of possibilities of what's available.
I know, yeah. It turns one instrument into like a massive arsenal of instruments, especially if you know how to play the keyboard. It's like, oh, I can play a flute, I can play, I can play violin, I can play anything I really want now. It's pretty crazy.
It is, yeah. And also there's the whole back to basics philosophy too of, hey, if it sounds great when you're singing in the shower, then it's a hit, like there's
Right.
like, it starts with some root idea, and, frequencies go up and down, and then like the rhythm left and right, doom, tsh, doom, tsh, or no rhythm. I mean, as you know, I create ambient relaxing music, and you can just sit at the guitar and just strum one single note with a bunch of effects processing on it,
Oh
echo,
yeah.
echo, 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 and reverb. And that's what's great about the production style. And I think I hit a moment of realization after probably year 2 or 3 of music production, and it was like, oh my gosh, music is infinite. But like, it wasn't like cliche, or I just didn't say it to say it. Like, I felt it, I could just grasp it, because you're down this beautiful pathway, and you just keep on recognizing what instruments you can add and you can stack, and you can have 10 channels to a song. I'm sure you and I know some songs are like
Yeah.
80 channels.
Yeah. Mostly like 80 to 120
Yeah,
at this point,
exactly. That's like
but
your baseline. And
yeah.
so that's what's beautiful. I feel like the guitar for you was something that really inspired you to like begin your connection with music. And then, as you said, your friend that brought into electric music and electronic worlds of, samples. And then you can have, whole plugins that open up so much. Out of curiosity, which digital audio workstation did you begin producing on?
Ableton back when it was like really, I mean, he'd been using it for like 10 years at that point. So we were on like
Hmm.
Ableton like 7 or 6.
Seven, yeah.
Yeah. So like way back in the day,
Yeah.
even before they had all the cool VSTs and all that stuff. But yeah, we loved it because of the session view. You can just like launch clips. That was like unheard of in my
Mm.
world at least. And he went to Berkeley, so he kind of had a background in music, so he kind of was in the scene for a while longer. But he's like Ableton, that's what you want, and especially if you're going to do
Nice.
it live. So this was just what I went with.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and as you and I know, they have Ableton 11 launching this
I
month,
know,
so
I
it's
know,
like
a little too
mañana.
soon.
Yeah, I know, I know. It's like you got to finish out all your projects. You don't
Before
really
all the
want to.
plugins flip, and then you have to upgrade them all. Yeah, just did that with 10 like last year. So
Yeah, it's a slow-moving train. It doesn't turn on a dime when you're on the
yeah,
track
yeah,
of. Yeah, that's great. Well, I love that I get to, and other people that are listening, watching, understand the life of a music producer, especially in the 21st century. There's so many possibilities. It's really fantastic. All right, question number 3. So, speaking about your musicality, your sound production that you create. So, question 3 is what makes your sound design unique?
So I blend a lot of styles. Like I said, I grew up listening to rock. I had a lot of jazz influence from my friends who went to Berkeley. I had a lot of electronic influence in college, and I never really wanted to lose the live instruments. I've seen a lot of electronic producers go down that route. And, they sound great. The sound design's amazing. The way that they put things together is amazing. But there's something about like an actual instrument, strings, or that brass section that I've looked far and wide, and it's very hard to emulate that kind of stuff. So I really like to bring in live instruments. I always keep that. And, it's funny because over the years, it's gone from an electronic place to kind of this otherworldly place because, as I've grown up, I've gotten into other things, metaphysical sciences and things like yoga, in the, in that community has completely changed the way I've approached music with intention. Like every sound has its place. I did a whole album with sound healing once, that every song had, the solfeggio tones in the background. They blended places from the earth's chakras with your chakras and all the tones put together. So it was kind of this holistic approach. And I think that's kind of where I've carved myself out in a way, where a lot of people will either be very jam band oriented or, very electronic heavy and have a hard time melding the two together. There are a lot of people that do it, do a really good job. People, like Flowsies, Pretty Lights, Break Science, they're awesome at doing like both kind of ends of the spectrum. But, being a little bit more down tempo and not so party music is it makes it interesting because you can kind of get a little bit more variety in the way the strings and the inflections and kind of the way your composition moves more like an orchestra rather than, a jam band. So that's kind of my approach I take when I, am making most of my tracks. And my style's kind of all over the place, but it's kind of settled in that one realm of live instruments with like electronic intention, I guess.
I love that. That's fantastic. And similar to the bio I read, it talks about how you have, blending of the modern electronic dance, organic instruments with the lush soundscapes. And of course, you play guitar, you add live strings and all these other aspects of that. So, as you and I know as musicians, you can only talk about music for so long before you have to just jump into it. So, this is like midway through our interview. I'd love to have you set up this song, what we're about to listen to. We'll probably play the first minute or so, and tell us the backstory and before we hear it.
Yeah, so the song's called UT Area. It's actually off a upcoming EP I'm working on right now. It's kind of getting back to roots. So UT Area means like ground. It's getting back to the ground, getting back to the earth, like getting back to that kind of endogenous space where I kind of really, came into my music production career. So I kind of took a step back and said, okay, what's really important to me? What sounds are kind of where I started in music, and kind of went for that. And just brought it down, the tempo down again. I was doing a lot of electronic music, and high paced, four on the floor dance beats. And after a while, I was just like, you know what, I need to get back to basics. I need to get back down grounded, and that's exactly what UT area is all about.
All right, so we are about to experience this song. So everyone out there, if you have high quality headphones, we always encourage that. Or studio speakers, or if you have like a Function One stereo setup,
Yeah, would be nice.
Yeah, exactly. And as you and I know, iPhones and other kind of computers and cars and Bluetooth. There's so many different ways we listen and enjoy music. So wherever you are, go and have a listen to Kapha music. So good.
Thanks, man.
That's really, really great track. Wow.
Thanks. Yeah, it's in the final mix and master now, so hopefully it should be out maybe next month. So it's kind of a sneak peek on that one, but it's off the new EP. It's like I said, getting really back to my roots, so really stoked about it.
Wonderful. And wow, I love how you created your overview of explaining how it is that you approach music, and then for us to really get that sneak preview of this track that's going to be coming out. So yeah, thank you for sharing. It's
Yeah,
wonderful.
glad to share, man.
Yeah. So question number 4. So how do people respond to your music? You just heard my authentic response. I was like, wow, that sounds amazing. And the blend and the vocals and the strings and the horns and the sax at the end and just all of it was like, yes. So
Yeah, so a lot of people, they say pretty similar things. Actually, they're kind of blown away. They're like, "Oh, instruments, what is this?" And it kind of is a mixed bag because in the yoga community, it's people are very kind of it's the opposite. They're like, "Oh, electronic, that's crazy." You know what I mean? Where like if it's really electronic and heavy, it's kind of like a new sound to their ears. Whereas in the
mm,
other kind of community, it's "Oh, whoa, live instruments, that's crazy." But it usually makes generally, even in my yoga classes that I've done music to, people are always moving. They're always kind of like flowing a little bit. I always try and keep the rhythms kind of syncopated and flowing, so you kind of have that natural kind of swing to it. And it really seems, you look out on the crowd sometimes and they're moving the same way you're moving. And it's, generally accepted as like, oh, wow, that was, something my ears haven't heard in a while. Maybe people have listened to, I don't know, like older types of like classical rock or even some of the, like 90s, like jam bands and stuff like that. And, hearing brass and, strings and things like that, it almost brings them back in a way to times where the things were not so digital in a way.
yeah, that's for a lot of us because I work and play in both of those worlds. And so anyone out there that's listening, there's of course music as far as music has always been like birds are singing, that's music, however you interpret sound waves. And then here's this instrument that someone started playing. Of course, the drum was like the first instrument pretty much as people started hitting things. And of course, in Africa is where these sounds and rhythms came, and they just started to, mold over time. And then you have music that impacts, different eras of human history, right? You have the Renaissance, the Baroque period, the classical period. Then you get into styles of music you mentioned earlier, like jazz. You get into turn of the century and music that then inspires kind of different types of dances, right? You have swing music, and then you get into hip hop and rap, and then that's like a whole other experience with like break dances when I grew up, and
Yeah.
then and then you get into the 80s music that then started introducing electronic sounds, and that was like that mind opener for a lot of people. And one of my all-time favorite bands we were talking about before we went live is Van Halen. And when
Yeah.
Eddie brought in the keyboards and he started playing synthesizer for songs like Jump with electric guitars, with amazing vocals with David Lee Roth, and the drums with his brother Alex, and but guess what? One of their albums, they brought their father on. He played clarinet on one of their tracks. So
Oh,
like, there's
wow.
so many different instruments that people play and can mesh with and commune with. And what I love and what's super exciting for me is, in regards to how people are responding to your music, is you get to have all these genres that you've loved then to come into the present day in the 21st century of like, well, let's bring some electronic soundscapes that then incite and evoke and inspire people's feelings in ways, or lights up their energy centers, their chakras. And then it gets people that are able to interpret and understand. So that's what I love about how people are responding to your music, is you can really coexist in multiple worlds. What we say, like same planet, different worlds.
Yeah.
And truly, for you to be a hybrid where you get to dance in both arenas, now you have so many, tricks under your sleeve. You'd be like, ooh, okay, I want a cellist or I want some guitar. Well, I play the guitar. Or, you can collaborate with your sister or whoever, right? Or you like,
Yeah.
I'm going to get a new plugin. I'm going to explore that for the next 8 hours.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it are tools, like what you said. It impacts people differently with like this digital spectrum. It's like you had a kick drum before, but now you can like feel the kick drum, you feel the thump, you can accentuate that low end, maybe distort the low end with harmonics, and I think Morrison said it actually. He said that, electronics is the way of the future, and that was in the 70s or 60s, so like, 30, 40 years ago. And here we are making sounds with computers and keyboards. So, it's kind of the natural progression of things, and not to lose sight of where we came from, I think is really important.
Yeah.
There's something to be said about the analog world too. In these top end studios, you still have 50,000, 60,000, 70 upwards, thousands of dollars of rack effects that people have been using for 50 years, and they still sound amazing. So not to lose kind of your roots was kind of big for me, especially in music, to just, kind of, integrate what I had been brought up with and kind of where we've gotten to, and kind of take it to that next level of musicianship.
I love it. Yeah, and that's where I feel that, more people that are able to kind of open their eyes. Like if you could, like a Bill and Ted Excellent Adventure, if you could time travel and you get like Beethoven to listen to Kapha music, be like, whoa, that's like, what is that? But it would be
Yeah.
familiar territory. That's what's beautiful. It wouldn't be such a deviation from what music is that it would be unrecognizable. So that's what
Yeah.
I love about you as combining and synergizing, and we all get to play in the sandbox of life with sound waves, and you
Yeah.
can pull from different sources and say, oh, I love this, I love that, this is what I'm up to. That's fantastic. Yeah, so what I'd love to do too is I found on your Instagram, which I encourage everyone to go to, a really cool photo of you, and maybe we can show the video of you jamming and playing the sax.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So
I just
that's pretty
recently,
amazing.
yeah, recently picked that one up.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So anyone that plays an instrument, of course, we'd love to know. Put your name in the comments and to understand. So here we go. If you want to check out Kapha online, which is actually, I'll just tee up the last question, which is, let's hear about your next project and where people can follow you online. And I'm going to put your online information. Go to kaphamusic.com, kapha.music on Instagram, and that's where I'm currently at. So yeah, tell us about the track we heard that you gave us a sneak peek to. Is that what's the release date on that? You got a timeline?
Yeah, I'm hoping that's coming somewhere mid-April. I have some engineering to do on that track, but my next project actually has just been submitted, so it's coming out in on March 19th. It's an EP called Quanta.
Nice.
I have a couple of tracks that were already released as singles. It's a 4-track EP. It's a lot. It's very tribal dance. There's a lot of xylophones and lots of Arabian flutes and things like that on that one. But it's a
Very
little bit
nice.
more. It's a little bit more upbeat, up tempo, kind of more like dancing and partying, which
Nice.
is yeah. So it's I'm kind of pivoting away from that. Like I said, with UT area, I have like 2 other EPs I'm working on right now with that UT area EP. But that one is really kind of my main focus at this point. It's like I said, really getting back to down tempo, getting into kind of that esoteric realm of music where, it's kind of a melding of senses and experiences all at once with the sound, as opposed to, as much, hard electronic sound design that might be coming out on the next EP. But I'm usually, doing streams. I work with Starborn Productions a lot with streams. I just had a Valentine's Day event like a week and a half ago. So I'm on Twitch quite often. And, with the state of the world the way it is, it's kind of hard to book a gig these days. But hopefully we'll be back, into a live realm soon enough with all the safety protocols and everything. But for right now, just streaming online on Twitch. I have a Twitch account, and like I said, it's Kapha Music. Like /Kapha Music on Twitch, and I do a lot of Starborn industry stuff with them on their channel as well. So mostly in the digital realm for right now.
Fantastic. Yeah, and you can see on the screen that's a picture of you in the flow in your element.
Yep. Yep. Always got a guitar strapped to my neck behind my back somewhere.
Yeah, always available. You never know.
Yeah, you never know when you want to just throw it in there. And like I said, all my stuff is actually mixed live, so I use all stems. I try not to use like master tracks. Here and there, I won't have time to stem something out before a performance, but generally it's 8 or 9 different stems that I'm controlling for all the tracks, and it really helps with transitions. And if I want to drop some guitar out and play some live stuff, it makes it easy to transition back and forth between those pre-recorded and live elements for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. So here's your studio set. This is your mastering tool, right?
Yeah, this is actually Lethal's actually a synth VST, so I use it for
Oh,
a lot of my
okay.
basses. Yeah, it's a pretty good bass
Nice.
engine. Yeah, and that disperser plugin is one of my favorite plugins. It's a very subtle kind of almost like a distortion effect, but adds a little bit of pop and sizzle to certain synth sounds. So if you
Very
want like a
cool.
bass line to really cut through in that higher spectrum, you can lay a little bit of that on, and it'll give you some harmonics
Is
right
it
where you
similar
want
to
them.
Serum?
Yeah, yeah. The disperser is its own standalone by kilohertz, but Lethal is kind of similar to Serum. Yeah, it's
Nice.
there's a lot of its presets out of the box though, and they're really really good. So if you need like just something that's a thick reese and you just really want to quickly get something in before you EQ it, you're just like, oh okay, just plug that right there, and it's really high end
Very cool.
samples. Yeah, they do a really good
Nice.
job.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. So on your Instagram, we got that pulled up. Everyone, you can see the studio set up. This looks like you in the vibes.
Yep, that's that track mixing in mono.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Such a good track. Nice.
Yeah, always
So
gotta check the
good.
mono. Make sure that stuff doesn't collapse when you bring it back to one channel.
Totally. And it looks like you have some really cool visual art. Nice. Oh, this is the online set. Very
Yeah, that guy.
cool.
That was actually from the Valentine's Day set. Canvas visuals out of St. Louis. He does some really cool stuff, visual work and rendering and things like that.
Oh, yeah. That's great. So this is your website, and everyone can see it
Yep.
on the screen,
Yep.
kaphamusic.com. And talking
Yep.
about visuals, I as well, I love having artists and graphic artists and VJs and anyone that can create similar to what you did with the artwork on your album, your artwork on your singles and your website currently that we're looking at. I think all of that really matters.
Oh
So,
yeah.
as you mentioned, you're on Instagram. Here's your Instagram feed. You're also on Spotify. So,
Yep.
anyone out there that follows artists on Spotify, from one artist to the next, we always enjoy the streams. And if you have any other way that you'd like to reach out to Kapha, feel free to go and send him a DM on Instagram. Remember, it's kapha.music. And then you can go to kaphamusic.com and find all of the links. And then here's your current Spotify, which is great. You got Kapha Radio, anyone can listen to. And then there's a further information about who you are. And yeah, that's great. So it looks like 2021 for you has been, a lot of creativity, a lot of focus on your projects, a lot of, as you're saying, like with this new song you're working on, like reinventing yourself, but also getting back to like your skills of like being an instrumentalist and electronic music producer.
Yeah, I've been like hibernation mode a little bit for the past like 6 to 8 months. I've been like
Yeah.
just kind of in the studio, putting my head down, really working on my mixing. That was like kind of a big eye opening experience. I started working with some high end mastering engineers, and they're just like, hey, this, that, and the next thing, pointers. And I was like, oh, wow, my room really is horrible, I guess. So
Yeah.
learning like new mixing techniques and kind of focusing more on the kind of the fundamentals of music production has been really where my head's at, just making sure that things are really high quality and everything blends perfectly, and
Yeah, I love
focusing on
that.
the actual sound of things, I guess.
It's similar like a sculptor, like there's always different approaches and techniques that you can sculpt sound waves. And a lot of people don't think that. Most people are like, a piano is a piano, but then you don't think of like, well, there could be electronic piano, and then you play that piano once and then you reverse it and then you add some other effects processing on it. So that one single piano sound, and then that piano, as you said, now in music production can be played as an organ or a
Yeah.
Rhodes or whatever synthesizer, like that plugin you're showing, and they create a bass line in it. So there's so many
Hmm.
infinite possibilities where in the old days, of course, all the styles of music, what you saw is what you heard, and what you heard is what you got. And there's still, though, the alchemy of having the right instruments being played at the right time. As a lot of instruments in the brass and the woodwind category, and of course in the electronic music, there's such a difficulty at this time. Who knows? Maybe we'll listen back to this interview in 10 years and be like, hey, they finally did it. Like you
Yeah,
can
right.
completely make sound exactly like that actual instrument. But as you said, like brass, you can't really replicate it to the full richness that you could a live instrument. And the
Hmm.
same thing for me with every time I have strings or cello. Big shout out to Jamie Shadowlight. She's my violinist who works on my projects. I just met this amazing cellist. Erdis, and my trilogy of albums, I have a cellist. Her name's Christine. And there's just something powerful about certain instruments, similar to right now our human voice, right? The throat chakra, as
Hmm.
they'd say in the yoga communities. And like without having the powerful control of understanding where vocals and the sample track that we heard today from you, Kapha, was great because it just had this etheric, divine, feminine soundscape that then complemented all the other instruments and the whole journey that took place. And you're like, whoa, I just was floating and feeling it. So very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said about, like you said, those live strings. I think that, there's, I think Native Instruments does some VST work where they have some expressions and some of the keys and things like that. But there's something, how hard you blow into a saxophone makes a difference. How hard you hit that string on the cello makes a difference. And, the way
Yeah,
that the room bounces sound off makes a difference. Where you put the microphone even makes a difference. So to get
yeah,
that all perfect in the digital realm, it's going to be hard. And
totally.
maybe they will one day, but not right now. Definitely not.
Absolutely. And also, like, conversations that can go on the macro level from this one of like, there's going to be AI, there's going to be all these,
Oh yeah.
like, what is it? I'm just going to think music and then the song will just pop out of my speakers.
That would be awesome if you could just immediately translate and just not have to mess with anything. If they get to that point, well, everybody will be
uh,
making music. It'll be great.
if all the non-music producers knew how many keystrokes it takes to get to the
Oh
center
my
of the
god.
song that you're attempting to
Oh
have
man.
come
How
to
many
life.
times I know how many times you hit that space bar to listen to that one timing of that one track. Just okay, move it a little bit, a little bit, a little
Yeah,
bit.
nudge, nudge. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. And so, what I love to do too, and you spoke about like loving music as a listener, a fan of a band or an artist or a group, and a style of music. I used to play drums and piano in a high school and college jazz band. And so I got into that genre. And I feel like it really allows for your mind to witness music, experience it, and then your approach as a producer, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I could do a seventh chord. Where if I wouldn't have taken all those jazz, classes or music theory or like been playing in a jazz, I may not have known about like the augmented, diminished, and all these cool,
Oh
funky
yeah.
things. And of course, that applies to all other styles of music. But what's beautiful, I feel, is you always have that to go back on, like the circle of fifths, or if you have the C major, the relative minor is A minor, and we hit these walls as creative souls. We're like, okay, I want to like bust through the wall, and now I just want to do this or that. And what I love too, and I'm sure you do the same thing, Kapha, is like having a community. And I feel like the fellow music producers out there designing music of specifically like for yoga and breath work or guided meditations or sound healing or astral traveling, like whatever
Yeah.
floats your boat. It's like I feel like there's some really great connections like you and I have and other individuals. I saw like T Loop likes your Instagram. I think we're in like a Instagram like engagement group where we share and talk about what we're up to. And so this is like a little for everyone that's watching and listening. This is like a little peel behind the layer, the curtain of like how we operate on a global scale, and understand like, hey, as long as we have proper recordings of live instruments, I don't care where you are on the planet, just send me the stems. I'll import them into my DAW, my digital audio workstation, and I'll do this, and then I'll create. And that's the difference from, being a producer to being a musician, which you can
Hmm.
have both roles. But if you're a studio musician and you're not ever going to say, okay, here's this really amazing piece of this puzzle, and then I can add this and this layer, and at some point, whatever is in your world, you get to create. And so that's what's wonderful about learning. And one thing that I do, and I'm sure you've taught a ton of your friends as well, because I was mentored by a really good friend of mine, JQ, who he was making the jump from being a DJ into music production. And we were in Reason, then we jumped into Ableton. It is essentially, he's like, hey, kid, I'll take you under my wings. You already know the music and you know how to play instruments. I'm going to show you this world. And I was like, mind blown
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
emoji. What? And that
Yeah.
was, as I said, about 2 or 3 years ago. That's when I felt it in my whole body, like, Oh my gosh, music is infinite. Like, how many lifetimes would I have to be here to like fully unravel all these creative ideas I have? And then as we and I, any producer out there understands, and any artist truly, like how many times did you attempt to write that poem before the final version was there?
Oh,
Or sometimes you're just in the moment. And as John Lennon said, I heard you say a Morrissey quote. As like John Lennon said,
yeah.
he didn't write one song. He allowed the song to write itself. And
Yeah.
that's that whole flow state and just allowing for that to take place. Or the contrast would be when you're taking driver's ed as a kid, there's a difference from driving a car and like cruising with your buddies and hanging, and you got
Yeah.
music, you got the windows rolled down, and you're just, oh, whoa, how do we get here? You're not thinking of the mechanics or
Right.
how do I, add a new MIDI track to the project. You just know the shortcut key, you just go for it. And so anyone out there that's listening to me and for Kapha to understand, there's a whole process around it. And to accelerate that, it does sometimes take what you said, like cocooning for, 6 months and being like, okay, I'm going to go deep into the portals of possibilities. And then when you
Hmm.
come out of it, you're like, check, I know how to do that. I totally understand it. Then your workflow and your efficiency, your pipeline just starts to emerge. Like at this point, I'm personally launching a song per month out in the world. And it's because I've built systems. And as you give a buddy of yours a shout out on Instagram for the video content, you have your teams. You're like, here's
Hmm.
someone that helps with my artwork. Here's my studio musicians that play these instruments. Here's someone that masters. Or even if you just, I love this. Do you ever do this? Like send, like you did today on our live streaming, but send a track to someone before it's launched and be like, all right, give me your raw feedback.
Oh yeah, I
How's
did that
this?
yesterday.
Oh, nice. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah, yep. And I think there's something like you said, like translating over, like you said, DJ going to producer. A lot of these aces are in their places. You had people like Led Zeppelin. They didn't record their own music. They didn't produce their own music. They were the musicians. They just came there. They showed up at the studio. They played their songs and they left. They, well, not left literally, but you know what I mean. Their job was done. They just had to sit there and listen to the mixing and mastering engineers do their thing. So to like kind of take both aspects of that and put them together, you're kind of trying to be all these people in different places, and to have a support system in place. Like I have guys who does album covers for me, and could I do it myself? Probably, but I'm too busy doing other things. And having someone master my stuff is another set of ears that I don't have. So I've heard the track a million times, and I've heard the mix a million times, and then you get lost in your room and what you've been tweaking for hours and hours, and then all of a sudden the guy's like, oh, you need more kick, or the snare's a little hot, and you're like, oh, I guess it is a little, you know what I mean? And
Yeah, totally. Fresh perspectives.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's what a lot of it is too. And even when you're in that kind of mindset, I think what you said is absolutely true, that sometimes the song writes itself. Some of the best songs I've written in a week or a day. They just come out and they're just on on the page, so to speak. And I've written probably hundreds of songs that I've thrown out or used parts of, and
Yeah.
never made it to fruition. I've even played them live, and I was just like, there's nothing that's of no use to me. I learned this or that technique, take that and move on.
Yeah.
So I think having that compartmentalized view helps, but you definitely have to have the holistic picture as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you're going through boot camp. You're training in order to develop, cultivate, which I feel every artist that's ever lived and is alive today and will live, it's how do you find your signature expression, whatever that is,
Mhm.
your signature sound, your signature, visual representation of art, your signature like poetic expressions, your signature, spoken word, jam poetry, whatever you're up to, whatever you love. And comedians have the same art form, right? Like, how do you do the pacing properly? How do you
Mhm.
wait for the response? And how do you observe life in a way where then you're putting it onto the page, as you were saying? And, for me, I feel like when you get to go deeper into your studies and understand, oh, this is how this works, and then know like how far down you want to go before you turn around or stop and say, I'm good. I feel like my cup's filled up as much as I'm going to make the size of the cup be, and then I'm going to have a mastering engineer that has been doing this for multiple years. And I love the analogy of like, if you had to have open heart surgery, would you go with the doctor that has like 30 plus years of experience, worked on 10,000 people, or would you have the kid that just got out of med school to crack open your heart. You know,
Yeah.
I'd rather have the person that's like, yeah, just another day at the office, you know.
Right. Yeah, and there's also that, not like you. It's actually funny that you say surgery, because there's kind of like the, that person right out of med school has an emotional attachment to it. You know what I mean? It's their first surgery, whereas the guy who's been doing it for years and years, there's no emotional attachment. You push yourself away from the project, so you're not, you don't. That guy doesn't know you've been doing this for 1,000 hours before the song's released, but he knows what he's doing, and he has his regimen, and he goes through the motions, and then when it comes out the other side, it sounds perfect. Could you do it? Of course. It would take you 30 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to be a mastering engineer. But
Sure.
you could. It's just, do I want to waste my time doing that, or just have someone who I know is going to create that quality, and I can focus more on the music, more on the production, more on the live sets, where that's kind of where it matters to me most.
Love it. Yeah, I feel like you and I are absolutely big fans of how collaboration allows us to look at things more objectively, which can be really powerful, because when you have a subjective experience, then you get, as they call in the yoga world, like attachment. And when you can experience that non-attachment, like, hey, this is what just came through. This is just what happened. I had this great idea, and wow, okay, it's here. How can I take that piece of the puzzle, build it out, little Tetris blocks, and design it and shape it and cultivate it, and really understand that, hey, that's the whole thing about being a master at something, or as in the old rule of, hours is like, if you do something for 10,000 hours or more. And I feel like we get to take quantum leaps. And if you're really passionate about something, if you're really laser focused, especially if you have mentorship, you have a team of people, you have the spirit of collaboration in play, and you just are feeling like, I'm aligned, like this is my moment, this is my dharmic path, like this is what I'm here to do, then it's like, boom,
It
the
falls
impact.
into place.
Yeah, exactly. And then you put your head on the pillow at night and you're like, yeah, it's amazing. Sometimes, as I'm sure you've had the moment of like hearing your music being played elsewhere without you like choosing whether it was played. It was just like, my music's just being played in the world somewhere. I was in a Shavasana at a yoga studio. I can't remember. I think we were in Bali or something. And I heard my song Breath, and I'd never met the yoga instructor. She'd never necessarily see, and then I come up afterwards. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you for playing my song in Shavasana. He goes, you're DTO? I'm like, yeah, I'm DTO. I'm like, it's so great. But then it's like the hard thing is, right, brother? It's like you could be in that moment, listening to your and you're like, oh man, why did I do that? I could have done this. And you can start like nitpicking and going into perfectionism. But then there's something to be like, all right, I'm good. Like, it's out.
It's
Because
done. Yeah.
how many hundreds of gigabytes of data is stored in the cloud or on a hard drive of like ideas that are just sitting there because you haven't spent the time on it. So to me, it's like, you got to get something. It's like that whole iceberg, right? Like, you only see 20%, 80% is below. And most people out there don't even usually understand, unless they're very creative and they have their own, artistic expressions. Is like, how many, books were written that were never out there in the world, or how many, songs that someone heard and they like judge themselves, and then they're like, I don't ever want to have someone hear that. But what's cool is, and you mentioned this too, like you've done sets, you've heard music, is like taking parts of it or repurposing it. And actually on my last album, in my trilogy of albums, there was a track, amazing singer, Kiyoshi. We started on this track when we first met, and I'm sure you have a story like this too. I met a fellow musician, and he was in the music studio, and like we just rolled up our sleeves, like, all right, let's go. There was no, side talk, conversation beyond that. It was like, oh, okay, well, here's this track. It's in C minor. Here it is. I already got to lay out the beat, like the skeletal structure, put it in, and then like 6 years later, I was listening back through the archives, and I was like, trusting that you create something for some meaning and intention and purpose, even if it's for the lesson alone, as you're saying, of like, cool, I understand how to do this better than ever. Or you mentioned kick drums earlier. Like, ooh, before my approach was I just hear a cool kick drum, drop it in, and never touch it. Oh, now I know how I need to put EQs on it, and I need to do this and shape and mold it, and like make it, and the resonant frequencies, and making sure that maybe I want to side chain it if I'm going to put the bass line in. So, you keep on going, but you're like, cool, I already went to kindergarten and I'm already graduated. So that goes back to the surgery of putting everything together properly and with excellence and with greatness. So it's awesome, brother.
It's actually funny you mentioned C minor, because that was one of the turning points of my, kind of, I wrote a song in C minor, and to get the bass right in any time of C with the sub bass, it's like one's too weak and one's too too much of a high note. It's just, that was one of the learning points where like, okay, you should probably like kind of plan where you're going before you start writing these songs. Like you're making yourself hard. It's making it harder on yourself later on when you can't, even get the sound you wanted to. And, that's when I kind of realized, I probably shouldn't be playing by ear all the time. It's kind of cool. And it's like, it's nice that it just kind of flows. I can just close my eyes and, my hands go on my guitar where they need to go. But having some sort of game plan, there's something to be said about that for sure.
Totally. What do they say? The clock's right twice a day, a broken clock.
Yep.
So sometimes you strike gold, right? And you're like, all right, it just happened. But I've been there too, with that analogy of like, all right, maybe I want to understand if I hear this tone, what note is that? Can I match it and then have some ability for it to really make it? I remember even going into micro details where I was so into like the music theory and the sounds and what key it's in that I was like, asked my buddy who was mentoring me, I was like, wait, the kick drum, could we make it like a C note? And then like, could we transpose it so then it goes to A? And then it transposes where it goes to F. So when the bass line goes dun, 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 that you match the kick. And he was like, I've never heard anyone ask that, but yes. And I was like, as long as it's a green light, then let's do it. So, and then after a while, I don't think I've done that for a while because it's, again, like there's the micro, macro details of sound production and music where you do at the end sometimes have to just be like, okay, how can I, with urgency and efficiency and with grace and the ideal expression of what kind of song I'd like to have out there, how can I get it completed within, my cutoff is something goes beyond 80 hours. I got to like question what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah.
I've got 80's been like a lot.
Well, I feel like there's like something to be said too, that like art is never finished. It's only ready to be shared. Like I could sit here all day with my kick drums. I would never release anything though, because of the same reason. I've done the, follow the note thing. And then after a while, you're like, you know what, I'm just going to pitch it up a fifth from the root key and then, just carve it out. And that's about it.
Totally.
But yeah, I've been the same way. And even when things I release, sitting in Shavasana sometimes, or, in a yoga class, or even just hearing my stuff in the car, I'm like, man, have probably tweaked that a little bit more or this a little bit more.
Totally.
But, it's part of the learning process. I hope, in 5 years I look back and I'm like, dang, that sucked. I've gotten better. Because if it's not, then you're not going anywhere. You know what I mean? You're staying stagnant. So, I think that's part of the process, and it's part about creating art. You share something when you think it's ready, and then, hopefully you grow from that point.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for sharing your art, brother. And I'm going to put on the screen your Spotify, Kapha. And anyone out there that wants to experience kaphamusic.com, kapha.music at Instagram, and of course, available on SoundCloud, Spotify, all the streaming apps. That's what's awesome about when we launch and distribute is that people, whatever they are enjoying to stream music on, check it out. And also as musicians and artists, any kind of direct messaging you want to send our way, even if it's something you experience with the music, feel free to do that. That's what's great about the global connectivity of this new world and paradigm that we keep on expanding into. Is like at any moment we can have these connections. If you have any questions, if you're actually wanting to learn how to produce music, you can reach out to either one of us for mentorship. We're not stingy. We love to share, and we already gave out a ton of golden nuggets in this interview today.
I know.
So you can rewind and be like, ooh, that was a cool idea. Never heard of that. And even if you just understand like the life of being a producer and the joy of distribution and having people experience that and creating art for the sake of creating art, it's really awesome. All right. Well, do you have any final words before we close out, Kapha?
I just want to thank you for having me here, man. It's really great to sit down and chat in the digital realm, and reach out to people and kind of share our experiences and stuff. So really thankful about the whole experience, and
yeah, brother,
glad to know you, man.
Yeah, equally felt, and I feel it. I'm sure that's not about the if, but the when. I'm sure there'll be a collaborative, either some remix or co-creation at some point. So
for sure,
we've been able in this experience right now for the last hour is to talk about music and understand how much in common we have of being hybrid producers in the world, and also creating music that has a transcendental experience that really takes people into a whole other space and place. And that's what's wonderful about sound production and music. So again, anyone out there that is listening, make sure you go to kaphamusic.com, and that is KAPHA music.com. And then you can check out my music, and that is dtomusic.com, and pretty much at DTO Music everywhere. And I have a new release coming out on Friday called Flight. It's an ambient meditation song. So anyone out there, feel free to check that out. And if you follow us on any platforms, either mine or Kapha's, then we would love to hear from you. So thanks again, and keep on enjoying your day.
Yeah, thanks, guys.